few things real quick. Firstly, I want to support the Destination Experience platform of sharing ideas. That's partly what we're going to do with this panel. But I also want to encourage us to be able to collaborate and help each other and help the region. And so we're going to close out this panel with part of that. I encourage all of you to come up to John and Rania and me if there's any way that we can help with anything going on here in Jamaica or the Caribbean. One quick housekeeping item as far as this panel is concerned. An interesting thing happened as I was preparing for this panel, which is about digital transformation and the fourth industrial revolution. I realized that many of us that are even in the industry have different ideas of what the fourth industrial revolution means. I invest in IoT companies, primarily the Internet of Things, and Klaus Schultz and the World Economic Forum wrote a book on this industrial revolution. But in talking to Rania, I realized that there's another aspect of this with automating factories, smart factories, data exchange, and so on. So I'm not too concerned as to the exact definition of the fourth industrial revolution. What I want to focus on is these amazing technologies and how they're impacting business and all of our lives. So we have two distinguished guests on our panel today, and they both have an incredible diversity of experiences, which I think makes them particularly well qualified to comment on these topics. First of all, we have John Coetzee, who is an analyst, journalist, speaker, and an entrepreneur himself. He writes on Forbes, among many other platforms. And I think his own experience as an entrepreneur, he's got an AR company that's just been funded, makes him a much better journalist with much better insight for all of us. Then we also have RANIA HOTEIT, who is an award-winning entrepreneur. And she's the CEO of ID4A Technologies. But within that company, they help much larger companies develop software and also hardware for manufacturing. So thank you to our distinguished guests. We're going to get going with the panel. So I'm going to first ask a question tailored to each of your diverse backgrounds, and then we're going to go into some others for both of you. So John, you recently wrote an article about how technology is transforming retail, both for the businesses that are selling products and of course for us consumers. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure, love to. I did some research that I call Taps, Clicks, Bricks, and it's about the interplay of mobile and desktop and bricks and mortar, where 88% of all retail, and certainly North America, still happens, and pretty interesting stuff out of there. One of the things I think that's relevant to this discussion, Fourth Industrial Revolution, is that we're entirely changing the concept of what a product is, or of what it means to be a customer. So, in the past, the first day you got something, you bought something, you took it home from the store, you unwrapped it, that was the best that product would ever be. And it could only go downhill. It get scratched, it get damaged, it get dropped, whatever. Today, with a modern product, a smart product, the first day you own something is actually the worst that you'll ever have that thing. It's the least smart, it's the least customized to what you do, it knows the least about you, and it gets better not only because of what you do, but also because of what millions of other consumers, users are doing as well. That's one interesting thing. The other interesting thing is a total redefinition of what it means to be a customer. Right? In the past, in retail scenarios, or you've got somebody who produces something, you've got somebody who consumes or uses something, and there's this vast gulf between them, and somebody talked about it on a previous panel, and that the only place they met was in the hands of some third party where some value exchanged hands, and maybe they tried to connect with you with a loyalty program or something like that. But today, Apple knows when I go for a run. Google knows when it's cold in my house. Google knows the quality of the air, if there are any poisons in my air at my home. Amazon knows when I can't do simple arithmetic. I need to ask Alexa a question. So there's this relationship between a customer and a company, and that relationship is not one just of monetary value, that one is of use creates more value. And use creates more intelligence, and use creates more intelligence and value for the entire ecosystem of products. So we're entirely changing what it means to be a customer, what it means to be a producer or retailer or brand, and everything that's happening in between.
Great, thank you. So that's really the retail and product side of things. And Rania, you were recognized recently by the UN General Assembly for some of your research in automation and AI and how this affects manufacturing. I want you to tell the audience about that, but also following up on John's answer, how do we need to change our manufacturing processes to be able to create products that are smarter and get better over time?
Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Kirk, for the invitation. It's really an honor to be here. It's my first time in Jamaica, and I'm looking forward to give and to interact with as many of you as possible afterwards. To answer your question, first of all, when it comes to the global manufacturing and production pipelines and the relationship to what I've done with the UN, it was more about also exploring areas of global labor exploitation and how technologies such as automation and subcategories like artificial intelligence and robotics can actually reduce global exploitation of labor. I'm very much interested beyond creating smart products and new technologies, how these impact lives and where are humans placed within the larger ecosystem of creating products and creating larger economies at the human rights level. When it comes to global production, it's important to understand that the more we have demand on production, the more there is room for exploitation of labor. When it comes to products that we use every day, products have to go through so many stages during the production cycle before they arrive to global markets. And normally, companies, when they want to produce products, they have to follow one of three strategies on how these products will be made. Whether they're smart or not, doesn't matter. The bigger picture is they either choose to locally assemble these products or to export or local production. And normally when companies choose local production as their strategy, they normally go into a foreign country. Let's say I have a product, I want to build a factory in order to produce it. I come into Jamaica, I build a factory, I hire local people, and I use local resources as well. But what people miss in these types of exchanges is that this gives me the greatest advantage to lower cost labor. And here is where we see many capitalists taking unfair advantage of workers in order to maximize the profit that they make from the products that these workers produce. This is where that cycle of abuse begins, and it starts with low wages, but it expands into so many other violations of human rights. So how does automation come into play to actually solve these issues? Given that the main incentive that companies have to exploit labor is to reduce the cost and maximize profit, this is exactly where automation comes into play in order to break that cycle of abuse and to reduce exploitation. When we talk about automation, what we're really talking about is any type of technology that by implementation it will be able to perform a task or a process without any human intervention. As simple as that. When we talk about artificial intelligence, what we're talking about is the capability of machines to be able to perform or imitate intelligent human behaviors, whether that is cognitive or physical. When we talk about robotics, we're actually talking about a branch of artificial intelligence, which is about designing and building and running and operating robots that can perform a variety of cognitive and physical tasks. So the more AI systems advance, the more robots become more efficient and accurate. And that can result in increased efficiency in the entire production system, which also increases demand by reducing the cost of products. At the end, we are able to remove the incentive for companies to abuse labor, being able to make money and make better products, and be able to also train and educate employees to these new automation shocks and adoption of new technologies. So it's not just about product or about technologies or about automation, it's also about how we belong in the entire ecosystem of how things are made.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask a two-part question. The first part is what sector has have we had the most impact with these sorts of technologies? And I think the more interesting one is what are the particular products? Companies are more interestingly products that have had, that's a cool example of recent innovation that's really changed things, either for the producer or the consumer, or both.
So for sector, I'll go broad. I won't say a specific sector, but I'll say what I call smart matter, which is matter that we're adding, any product thing that we're adding four things to. Chips, radios, sensors, motors, and we're doing that very, very quickly. At CES early this year, I saw that for $14 you can add Google Assistant to any product. There's the entire chipset, everything you need, shove it in your teddy bear, and it's got the Google Assistant, right? That's one thing. And then for the product, you want that right away?
Yeah.
I'll just say Amazon Echo. I think that's an obvious answer. Sorry, apologies, but it's really changed computing in a couple of ways. First of all, we've got voice-first user interfaces, which is a big frickin' deal. And secondly, it's a big step towards ambient computing, where the computer is not obvious. You don't see the computer, it just is. It's immanent in an environment. And so I think that's a pretty big step there.
Great. And Rania?
In addition to what you just mentioned, I think in the medical field is going to be also a lot of opportunities for new IoT devices to make a huge impact on how this whole industry is run, particularly when it comes to other automation technologies such as 3D printing. I think it's creating a huge impact on how organs are going to be also replaced in case of damage. So that's an important sector to highlight as well, in addition to different types of automated devices.
I'm a big believer in the medical and health apps, and if you look at, for example, wearable technology, future clothes, you look at all the heart attacks that could be detected and prevented just by, simple signals from your watch, your clothes. It's all already happening. It's just very expensive right now, so I'm looking forward to the next generation that will be affordable consumers, and that's really going to drive, we were talking about health earlier, drive better health for all of us, fewer deaths, and so on. So all of these new technologies also create some legal and ethical issues, again, for both sides, the producers, well, mainly really on the production side. Can you talk about, maybe Rania, maybe you can start, can you highlight some key legal and or ethical issues that we need to be aware of, maybe we should be regulating? What are your thoughts?
The major aspect that people are concerned with is privacy and security, because it's kind of inherent in the fact that when you open up loops that have been previously closed, it just becomes an automatic issue. So that's one of the big problems that a lot of companies are forced to look at more closely. And with that also comes legal consequences as well, because as soon as you talk about breach of security or privacy, again, it's an automatic legal issue as well to protect people's rights. Other areas that are also worth mentioning is when it comes to employment and loss of jobs, because that's the biggest fear that people have when it comes to automation. But I'm totally against the idea that we're going to have any type of mass unemployment due to automation. Actually, historically speaking, technology never, ever, ever caused mass unemployment. It's other factors that could have caused these kinds of shifts in economics. And we can talk about this later. I know you want to keep answers short, but those are the two major concerns that I normally think.
Sure, and before I ask John the same question, you look at the Google Duplex, the assistant that's now mimicking humans, there's a lot of ethical issues about that. It's funny, Carnegie Mellon just announced a new AI degree, the first supposedly in its nation, and it's a super hot area, but I self-designed one of those majors at Stanford in 1990, and I couldn't get a job when I got out, funnily enough. Anyways, John, do you want to talk about ethical and legal implications?
It's interesting that you mentioned privacy because, with GDPR coming around, everybody globally has to be aware of it. And one of the things I said recently, if data is the new oil, prices just went up. But, as humans, we suck at understanding unintended consequences of what we do. And so when we create new innovations, we don't really understand what's going to happen. I'll give you two examples. One is ride sharing, Lyft and Uber and other companies. We thought that would actually take traffic down. And what we're seeing in places like New York and LA and heavily ride-share locations, traffic is actually way that edge up because you've got all these ride-sharing cars cruising around looking for people to take them in, and so they're actually considering, hey, do we need to actually make a change and limit the number there? That's interesting. And an unintended consequence, we thought it would actually take traffic down. It hasn't yet. May in the future with driverless, we'll see, and 100% use and everything. Second case is Waze. Where, Waze, it's like Google owns it, it's mapping, tells you where the traffic is so you can avoid it. And so what Waze has resulted in is a lot of people going on the back roads. And local communities are really getting ticked off because all these people are going down these formerly quiet streets that Waze is directing them to because the main thoroughfare is choked up and blocked. And so they're considering legislation around that.
Actually, I want to add to this point that you made about Uber. In fact, what happened is that Uber began to facilitate financing so people can buy cars to become drivers on Uber. So that
Intended consequence.
yeah, exactly. So that kind of added to the problem of adding more cars on the road rather than the initial intention that we're going to actually reduce cars by ride sharing and by creating these technologies.
Cool. Before the next question, I'm just going to share for any entrepreneurs in the room who might want to do this. Here's a killer app in this space. You have Uber, you have Lyft, you have all these valuable companies. If you create an app that basically disintermediates those, checks with all the different other ride-sharing apps and provides the consumer who's got the best pricing availability, you can actually disintermediate and take away all that traffic and be king of that market. So some entrepreneur here, please do that. So next question. What are your predictions for this world for the next, say, year and or decade, whichever you prefer to address? Rania, do you want to start? John?
Everything will become smart. So we have smart toilets today. It'll open as you come, it'll flush when you walk away, it'll play music. I don't know why you'd want that, but it will play music. Smart mirrors that'll tell you things are going on. We need smart roofs, we need smart windows that know when they should be open or closed, that will accept or not accept light coming in because based on temperature inside. Everything will become smart. So there's going to be real challenges in integrating that data and providing data security for that. Because a smart home, many of us probably have smart homes, right? You may have 10 or 15 different smart devices in your home, are actually very noisy, electronically, traffic speaking, and privacy is a big issue here. So a couple issues that come from that.
Rania?
There are multiple trends that will become more prevalent in the next decade, I would say. Robots definitely are taking over, but you should not be scared because that means we're going to need to shift into new ways of doing things, which requires new educational systems and new training and new skills that would move people away from how they've been doing things to becoming more on the innovation side and become more integrated in the world of maintaining and operating AI and really using their brains and participate in growing this economy. IoT, I think it's going to also keep growing really big. We're estimated to have 30 billion connected devices by 2020. And the global market is also predicted to increase to $7.1 trillion. So there's a lot of space for growth.
And just to ping on one of those things you're talking about in terms of automation and robotics, is interesting because you mentioned earlier that your feeling is that the more automation has never resulted in mass unemployment. Interesting study that I looked at recently, reported on, was by ABB Robotics. They have about 300,000 industrial robots around the globe. And the highest concentration of robots is in the richest countries. And the countries where there's the highest concentration of industrial robots, there's also the lowest unemployment. That's interesting because what does it cost to create an industrial robot? You might buy that robot for $1.5 million, you might buy that for $3.5 million. So if you're developing an economy and you built a competitive advantage because of low labor costs, are you going to get doubly screwed now? You had the crappy jobs where you got exploited that you talked about, and now you've been innovated out of it because it's been home sourced to a robot or an automated system that's producing it. Interesting questions.
Yeah, there's actually studies that show that, and this is a previous generation, but in many areas where you are outsourcing manufacturing, that people move up the labor chain into higher knowledge worker type jobs, and I hope that trend continues. Okay, so penultimate question now, just as another follow-up. What are the unintended consequences of some of the things that we just talked about that you can think of that we should be concerned about?
I'll continue with the discussion related to robotic automation because, again, it's the biggest fear that people have right now when it comes to employment and the whole future of work. What people don't really understand how actually robots are going to create more jobs because they don't get the logic behind it and the mathematics behind how can actually replacing humans can create more jobs for humans. But I think that when it comes to robotic automation, there will be a huge tectonic shift and we're already starting to feel it and be scared of it. And it definitely has both a positive and a negative effect. The negative effect is displacement, which we're all scared about, that we're going to lose jobs. But in fact, if we look at history, just the 500 years ago with industrialization, what happened historically, the displacement effect might be what we feel in the beginning, but in the long term, it's the positive effects that start to dominate, which is the productivity impact. That's normally what people don't really understand. It becomes a matter of us really understanding what we should do to shorten that displacement time or shrink it down by equipping and training people to adapt faster to these changes rather than saying, well, we're going to have this huge negative impact and what are we going to do? But how do we prepare to make it shorter and to reduce the time where people might feel these shifts happening, if that makes sense?
As maybe an unintended side effect, but certainly an effect. And it's something that we have to really think about is, what does it mean to be human in an era of smart machines? And it's a really, really challenging question. And you think about automation, you think about robotics, let's be really honest. Most of the jobs, especially blue collar, but many white collar as well, that we currently do with humans are actually done by robots. The robots happen to eat and breathe just like we do, drink and have families and other things like that, but they move this widget from here to here. They take this widget and they screw this widget on here, right? This is robotic. And nobody grew up saying, you know, when I'm growing up, when nobody was young and when they grew up said, when I grow up, I really, really want to, you know, take a widget off the shelf and attach it to a thing and see it go down the line a little farther. Nobody wanted to do that. We're scared about displacement of jobs, and I think that's accurate. We need to be aware of that. Not every truck driver can be a computer programmer. Not every person on the assembly line can become a psychologist or whatever. But we need to examine what it means to be human, what it means to deliver value as a human. And it's got to be beyond the robotic jobs that we've had in the past. I think this is the really, really critical problem that we do have to explore, because I am worried about displacement. I am worried about job loss, because we've already seen in the United States what happens when you have the quote-unquote flyover states of people who are depressed and they've lost out in the last couple of decades. They haven't seen income growth. The income growth has gone up to the top 10%. And where is it coming for them? And those jobs that are simple and obvious, maybe truck driver, are going away. And what will they do? We need to figure that out, or we will have violent revolution in places like that.
Sure. Also, one other part of the solution, just kind of following up on one thing Dr. Boone said in an earlier session, clearly part of the solution is knowledge, education, and training for those workers and for everybody in the society. And this leads me to my last part of the talk, which is, and again, a two-part question here. You know, what are the things we can do? What are your ideas specifically for Jamaica and the Caribbean in this area? And is there a way you can personally help? What can you offer the entrepreneurs, the investors, and other people in this room? You know, how can you help locally? And of course, I encourage all of us to follow up with our distinguished panelists after the talk as well.
For me personally, I think there is a lot of room for growth when it comes to the entrepreneurial sector. I think right now there are very few Jamaican enthusiasts that are coming back from different places around the world where they maybe went away for education or went away to explore other job opportunities, but they thought it's better for them to come back home and reinvest here. So I think there is a huge opportunity to nurture and to cultivate an entrepreneurial community within Jamaica in order to open up new possibilities of creating new types of businesses and start to reduce export a little bit, because I think manufacturing has been a sector that's been also dying out in this country. And I think it would be a proud moment at some point to see made in Jamaica products that are exported all over the world. So I think we need to cultivate more entrepreneurs that are willing to take risks in these areas to start to produce products here and create new businesses here and start to take charge of their own economy. What I can do, come talk to me if you're interested in starting a business, if you have new ideas, if you want to explore the development of new types of products that could be beneficial to your community or to the global community of consumers, come talk to me. So that's all I can say.
Thank you. John?
As the motorcycles go past, the two words I would say would be chase success. And what I mean by that is that the biggest predictor of future success is past success. And the biggest accelerator for an ecosystem is a big exit. And there are stories of Jamaican success in technology and business that are incredible and are amazing. I saw some of them last year at Tech Beach Retreat that Kirk also put on. And I think you need to chase those successes. You need to embrace them. You need to celebrate them and publicize them. And as those successes come to fruition and there's exit events, or they continue to grow, resources will spill out. We've seen the PayPal mafia. What has the PayPal mafia done? Incredible, amazing, huge companies. And you can even, SpaceX and Tesla are among them, just a couple of them, right? So there's a lot of things there. I think it's difficult to go on a broad-based approach. I think we need that. You need a lot of education. You need a lot of things happening at elementary, secondary, and post-secondary institutions. Absolutely. You need national things that are going on. But you need shining stars, which you can hold up to the world, hold up to the nation, say, look, she did it, he did it, they did it, we can do it, follow them, go work for them, learn what they know, and do it yourself again. And if you can do that, I think that is super, super, super effective. And for me personally, seek me out. I'm not hard to find, pretty Googleable. If you can figure out how to spell my name, which is challenging, I understand. And if there's an interesting story there, I'd love to help tell it.
And just to follow up on that last part, so we were here together in Jamaica in November, and I read your articles then, and you found lots of interesting stories. Just to connect the dots, if you have interesting stories here in Jamaica or the Caribbean, it's a win-win for you to come find John, share them. He may write about them, and that's good for all of us. So thank you very much. Thank you to our panelists.